already established protocol, and further standing on the authority of the Vice Chancellor, ably represented by Deputy Vice Chancellor Academics, may I humbly request the keynote speaker to be on his feet while I read the salutation. Sheikh Nurudeen Lemu is a Director of Research and Training at the Dawa Institute of Nigeria and Assistant General Secretary of Islamic Education Trust, MENA. He is the Technical Advisor, Nigerian Environmental Society, Niger State Branch, a founding member of the Regional Center for Expertise, MENA, and a member of the Advisory Board of the New Horizons College, MENA. He has been a member, National Awards Committee, Ford Foundation Jubilee Transparency Awards, Nigeria, and a teacher trainer, Islamic College, Sydney, Australia. Sheikh Lemu is a Director of the Development Initiative of West Africa, the Interfaith Activity and Partners for Peace, and a member of various committees of the Jamaat Nasser Islam, and the Dawa Coordination Council of Nigeria. He was one of those nominated by Nigerian Supreme Council for Islamic Affairs to represent Nigerian Muslims at the last National Conference in 2024. He has also been an independent director of Lotus Capital Limited since inception in 2006. Sheikh Lemu holds a bachelor's degree in agriculture from Ahmad Bello University, Zaria, the MSc Resource Management from Edinburgh University, United Kingdom. He is a fellow of Africa Leadership Initiative of West Africa and the Aspen Leadership Institute, Colorado, USA. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you the keynote speaker for today's event, Sheikh Nurudeen Lemu.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. I seek refuge in Allah from Satan the accursed. In the name of Allah, the most gracious, the most merciful. My brothers and sisters in Islam and in humanity, I greet you with the greetings of peace, the greetings of Allah's prophets and messengers. Peace be upon you, or as we traditionally have it in Islam, Assalamu alaikum. With the permission of the chair, I will stand both beside and avoid on existing protocols, and like to start by saying this is the greenest campus I have ever visited. The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, said there are three things that the eyes don't get tired of. Water, and the sight of flowing water. And I was very happy to see a stream as I was coming here. The second thing he said was greenery. And I'm glad to see all the trees around. I even got to see a squirrel. I didn't believe these things, very back at home, it will quickly be classified as bushmeat. So congratulations for that. And the third thing in the hadith, the Prophet ﷺ said, we don't get tired of the face of a faithful person. May all that be here on this campus. The topic, looking at Islam and its laws, inclusivity, universalism. I would like to start by saying there was a king who, when he was happy, he got too excited. And when he was sad, he got too depressed. And he asked his viziers and advisors, what wisdom can you give me that can solve my problem? In fact, he set up a committee to get all the wisdom of the world from every region. At the end of all of it, it was in volumes. And he said, I have no time to read all these volumes. Could you summarize it all into one book? And they summarized it into one book. And he said, I'm too busy to read. Could you summarize it all into one sentence? And the final sentence was, this too shall pass. And so whenever he got very excited, he was just reminded, whatever it is, this too shall pass. If he got too depressed or angry, this too shall pass. What we find is, in every field, scholars try to summarize and get to the essence of things. A Jewish rabbi who was a scholar in the religion of Judaism was addressed by a person who was an idol worshipper. And he said to him, if you can recite the whole Torah standing on one leg, I will become a Jew. The Jewish rabbi, that's not what he said. You think he will screech, right? The Jewish rabbi lifted one leg and said, love for others as you would love for yourself. Then he put his leg down and said to the guy, that is what the Torah is all about. The rest is all commentary on just that. Scholars have tried to essentialize the message of Islam. Imam Shafi'i said, if the only thing Allah had revealed was Surah Al-Asr, where Allah swears by the token of time through the ages, that man is in loss. وَالْعَصْرِ إِنَّ الْإِنسَانَ لَفِي خُسْرٍ. And he then says, إِلَّا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا, except those who have faith, وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ, and do good deeds, وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالْحَقِّ, and engage in the mutual teachings of truth. Am I depending on inbuilt microphone now?
Yes, sir.
وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالْحَقِّ وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالصَّبْرِ. You can hear me?
Yes, sir.
Welcome to Ilorin.
That's not me. Seems there's a lot of competition for my time. The Prophet ﷺ said, religion, this deen, is about nasiha. It's about sincerity. Sincerity to yourself, sincerity to other people, and sincerity to God. And so the first hadith in Sahih Bukhari is that actions are judged by their intentions. You can make mistakes as a lawyer, but with a good intention to solve a problem. Or should I hold one as insurance? that if you make a mistake in issuing a judgment while honestly trying to solve somebody's problem, you get one reward. If you are correct in your diagnosis and your prescription, in your assessment and what you recommend, you get 2 rewards. Why? At least you cared and you tried and you were sincere. For today's topic, fuqaha generally refers to the jurists, those who deal with law. And a jurist, when judging anything, would have to refer to the evidence, which is the focus of usul al-fiqh, the legal theory, the principles, the adillah, the proofs. But no use of evidence is useful if it doesn't achieve the objective of the law. The law has a purpose, and that is described as the maqasid of the Quran and the Sunnah, or the maqasid of Shari'ah. And so, in reality, a jurist would never separate them. For the sake of debate, it is useful to look at things from different perspectives. And what that helps us with is appreciate the synergy that happens when you look at a case from all angles. Considering the audience, before talking about Islamic law, I would like to say a little about how Islamic law develops, how does it evolve? Because then I hope that will not just answer our question for the topic, but be useful to all of us as we listen to various sides of the debate. It is said that a picture is worth 1,000 words. But a good metaphor is worth 1,000 pictures. Metaphors have been used by our Creator to summarize a lot about our purpose in this life. In one place, the metaphor used in the hadith is that of a traveler. That we are in this world as travelers, on an eternal journey from the time you are born, death just being a change of address and location, but the journey continues. For better, and we hope not for worse. So one metaphor is that of a traveler, and you can unpack that metaphor and actually write a book about it. Another metaphor used is that of a servant or a slave of the most merciful. And you can imagine, if you are a servant of the Rahman, the most merciful God, what kind of a servant would you be to the guests of God? Another metaphor used is that of a Khalifa, a viceroy, an ambassador, a vicegerent, a representative of God on earth, with a lot of authority. Human beings have unbelievable power to even cause climate to change, to cause the extinction of species. But we are here as stewards to take care of the planet Earth. Another metaphor used is that of a shepherd. And we find this in most scriptures. That kullukum ra'in, every one of you is a shepherd and is responsible for his circle or her circle of influence. The Prophet used another metaphor to describe a believer and said a believer is like a date palm. So he used that tree as a metaphor. And he said, everything about it is useful. In a hadith he said, the best of you are those who are most useful to others. The benefit of metaphors is it allows us to unpack from its richness. My hope is that I will share a little story that I hope will be a metaphor for understanding what usulul fiqh is, what is Islamic legal theory or the principles of Islamic jurisprudence, to understand qawaid al-fiqhiyah, Islamic legal maxims or Islamic legal philosophy, and also maqasid Shari'ah, the higher intents and objectives of Islamic jurisprudence. There was a man and his wife who are planning to go for Hajj. This man is well respected in his town, but he has a habit. When he goes for Hajj, he would go with his wife and he would periodically call to speak to family members. Before he left, he gave some standing instructions to the family. Because of his integrity and the social services that he offered, some people who want to slaughter rams and want to slaughter 2 or 3 or more would actually just send the ram to his house and let him decide what to do with it. And so sometimes he would send this ram to this orphanage, another ram to the leprosy home, another ram to one poor neighborhood, another ram to another community that is in need. This time, since he was not going to be around, he left some instructions. Call the family members. One instruction: if anybody brings a ram when I'm not around, they bring one ram, send it to the leprosy home. If they bring another one, send it to the orphanage. If they bring another one, send it to this madam's neighborhood and the poor people there. If they bring another one, to another place. But one rule you should never break: never eat the meat of any ram that is brought. It must always be given out, because I am leaving you with your own ram. So don't touch any that is brought. Give it out. But another piece of instruction: in every situation, consult each other, use your head, use your reasoning, and always ask yourself, if you are confused about anything, what would I do if I was around? You know me enough. What would I do if I was around? And he left those instructions in writing. And his wife and him went for Hajj. Meanwhile, back at home, somebody brought one ram. Do you think the family has any problems on what to do with that ram? No problem. Instructions are very clear. They brought a second ram. Any problem? No problem. Every 2 days, the man will call home to say how things are. But he had not called for 3 days. On the 4th day, somebody called the home and said to the family, unfortunately, your dad lost his phone. And he said I should drop this message with you. He will be focusing on his Hajj. He will not get in touch with you until everything is over. The next day, another ram came. The next day, somebody sent a cow. Do they know what to do with the cow? Any instructions about cow? No, no instructions about cow. they started to discuss with each other, so what do we do about the cow? Or should we consider one cow is equal to 4 rams? Then the younger brother came in and said to the family members, the brothers and the sisters who were still discussing, it seems the cow is sick. He quickly called a friend to get a vet to come and look at the cow. The vet said, it's 2 more days before Eid. They'll go tomorrow and the day after. This cow has been traveling from Mali. This is a kind of cow that comes from Mali. And most likely, it didn't get to rest. It is stressed, and from my experience, what usually happens with this cow, 50-50. We can give it medication, but if we medicate it, we are not sure if it will survive. But if we give it medication, you cannot eat that cow for the next 2 weeks. It may die. And if it's going to die, it will probably not give you more than 24-hour notice. The family said thank you and met to decide what to do about the sick cow. Now I'd like you to think, as I'm speaking, about how a jurist would approach the matter of the sick cow. The elder brother said, what should we do about the sick cow? And people started coming with different suggestions. This brother said, let's slaughter it and distribute the meat. Another one said, let's give it medication. Another one said, let's just give some poor people the cow and let them decide what to do with it. Another one said, let's just wait and see. The elder brother then changed his question. He said, all right, let's not discuss what to do with the sick cow. Let's discuss what method we should use to get the best answer of what to do with the sick cow. Are we together? So let's not talk about what to do with the sick cow. Let's ask ourselves, what methodology should we use in getting the best answer on what to do with the sick cow? If the issue with the sick cow had been answered in the notes left by the father, it would have been straightforward. If they were able to get in touch with their mother, that probably would be the second highest authority on what to do with the sick cow. But they cannot get in touch with their family in Hajj. And so one of them suggests, let's look at all those people who know our father best, his friends and family members, and we consult them and see whether we can get a consensus. If they can all agree on what to do with the sick cow, then I think we have represented our father in the best way. He can't be angry with everybody. And the youngest brother said, I will be writing down these suggestions. And he wrote in Arabic, Ijma, consensus. So that is one source of what to do with the sick cow. But then somebody said, the time it will take us to get a consensus, this cow may be dead. And one brother said, is this the first time an animal is getting sick in our family? Or has it happened before? In the past, if you remember 5 years ago, a ram got sick. Our dad did not wait for Salah. He didn't wait for Eid. He slaughtered it and distributed the meat. I think our case with the sick cow is very similar with the sick ram 5 years ago. And so by analogy, the cases are close enough to say whatever prescription was given then, this is close enough to that case to give the same prescription. And the younger brother wrote down analogy. In Arabic, what did he write? Yes. He wrote qiyas. Then the sister said, why are we cracking our heads on this issue? Why not just go consult our auntie? She is the sister of our father. Or consult our grandfather. Nobody knows our father better than any of them. If they say something and nobody else disagrees, we go with that. So let's get the opinion of somebody who is so close, a real companion of our father. And the little student of Usul al-Fiqh who was sitting and listening wrote opinion of a companion that is not conflicted by others. In Arabic, what did he write? Rai of a Sahaba, or fatwa of a Sahaba. Another sister said, I still prefer consensus. But it is true, finding a consensus of all the friends and family members will be too cumbersome. Can we just look for friends and family members who are still in town? We can call them, it doesn't take too long to consult. So we don't need everybody, but those who resided in the town where our father lived for most of his time, or at least where he and his family members resided. And the younger brother wrote down the practice of the people of this city, or Amal Ahl al-Madinah. Another one said, is this the first time cows are dying? No. There must be some customary thing to do. If we consult butchers, if we consult vet doctors, what do you normally do when before Eid, a cow or an animal is sick? Aren't there some local norms, local customs to follow? The other brother said, yes, that's a good idea. Let's find out what are the norms. And the younger brother writing wrote what? Local custom, al-urf wal-'ada. And then somebody said, if you remember, one of the stories our father was telling us of his great-great-grandfather who was a king, and some disease affected cattle in those days. How about we take a cue from what our great-great-grandfather did? And the Usul scholar says, this wisdom of the past would be what? Thank you. Shar'u man qablana. The laws of earlier revelations. Another person said, let's just make sure whatever we do, harm does not come to that cow. We don't waste the meat. The cow doesn't suffer unnecessarily. Whatever is going to happen, that cow must not die before we slaughter it. In other words, anything that is going to lead to loss or harm, we will block any way, any thought that will lead in that direction. We want preclusion, preventing harm. And what did the younger brother write? Saddu Zariya. Yeah, blocking means to harm. Another one said, this is your calculation, how about we simply ask, since we know the objective, we know the maqasid for which people send these rams and cows, we know what our father said, we shouldn't eat any of the meat, it should be for the benefit of others, then let's simply ask ourselves, what brings the greatest benefit to the greatest number of people who really need it? Let's consider what is in the public interest or the greatest benefit. And the younger one wrote what? Maslaha or Masalih al-Mursalah. Consideration of public interest. And then somebody said, you know what? Let's just look at everything that has been said, considering the majority or what is the consensus of our town, what is customary, reasoning by analogy, the opinion of a relative, what is in the interest of everybody, what will make sure the cow doesn't die. After considering everything, what is the wisest thing to do? What would be equity? What would be fair where there's no written law? What's the, when you say common sense, well-informed, what would sound reasoning dictate? And what did the younger brother write? Istihsan. Thank you. Juristic preference, juristic discretion. The wisdom of the jurist that overrides any other evidence. And so to make it easy to remember, and this is not a class for that purpose, when the Quran and Sunnah are silent on an issue, or where there's some ambiguity, the text is not too clear, or we are not, the Quran and Sunnah is very clear, but it's not talking about this particular context. What our father left behind was very clear what to do with rams, but it wasn't even clear what to do with a sick ram, let alone a cow or a sick cow. And ijtihad now picks up. But to guide ijtihad, to guide reasoning, instead of just jumping arbitrarily to conclusions, there's a methodology of approaching issues. This is the methodology described as usul al-fiqh, where you look at various forms or sources of evidence to guide you in what's the best thing to do. And for some scholars, they would consider after Quran and Sunnah, the next highest authority would be ijma. Others would put followed by qiyas, followed by maslaha, followed by something else. Another group of scholars would say no. Like in the Hanafi, after Quran and Sunnah, the next is istihsan, followed by ijma, followed by qiyas. In the Maliki school, after Quran and Sunnah, the next they would consider is Amal Ahl al-Madina. Then they would consider maslaha, and then they would consider qiyas, and then urf, and these other tools. The Shafi, the Hanafi, the Hanbali, the Zahiri, each with their methodology. A school of thought is really just a school with its own unique methodology. Each trying to see how to best represent the Prophet ﷺ in his absence on every new issue. But as with our family with the sick cow, they can look at these sources of evidence. As a lawyer or a jurist would look at usul. But you also remember that there are certain principles that the text is trying to protect. The text, a religious text, any writing is really trying to hold on to the meaning. The text has a purpose, the spirit of the text. The literal words are what we use to hold on to the spirit. And so if a context changes and the spirit of the law will not be served by applying the letter of the law, equity prevails. You cannot do injustice in the name of God. Why? We have enough teachings about standing for justice in the Quran that we will not allow your own ijtihad and juristic reasoning to override a clear maqasid, an objective of Sharia. The Quran and Sunnah is so clear in so many places that we should preserve and promote faith in God, what is called the hifdul deen. That any ijtihad and juristic reasoning, any individual's interpretation that is going to end up causing harm to faith in God, we would put it aside over the objective. Why? Because that objective of hifdul deen has been established by so many verses of the Quran, so many hadith, that we would rather doubt your interpretation than doubt the maqasid that are mu'tabar. They are based on clear text. We have enough evidence from the Quran and Sunnah that we should preserve life. The preservation of life is taken so seriously that there is no law in the whole of the Quran and Sunnah that cannot be put aside if it will save lives. In fact, another maxim will say, ad-darurat, when somebody is in a case of darurat, dire necessity, tubihul mahzurat, allows those things that are usually prohibited. And so yes, the default ruling of Sharia is that pork is haram, but that is talking to somebody who is not starving. The default ruling is alcohol is haram, but that's talking to people who are not in a state of dire necessity. To insult Allah or to insult the Prophet is haram. Under normal circumstances, it would be a statement of kufr. But if you don't say it, and people would kill you. When Ammar bin Yasir came to the Prophet ﷺ and said, I feel very ashamed for something I did. The Prophet said, what happened? He found it difficult to say. And he said, these people tortured me and said if I did not deny Allah and deny you, they would torture me even more. And so I renounced you and I said so many things that were bad. The Prophet ﷺ asked him, when you were uttering those words, was it with conviction? It came from your heart? That's what your intention was? He said, no, far from it. The Prophet ﷺ said, not just you have no sin for what you did, but next time they do the same, repeat it. Next time they try to torture you, repeat it. Why? Because your actions are actually going to be judged by your intention as what is in the heart. That the laws of Sharia continue to accommodate people in various contexts. If one were to liken usulul fiqh to the driving of a car to a successful destination, knowing how to put the gear, knowing where to put the key, knowing how to turn, knowing that you should signal, knowing how to use your wipers if it's raining, all that ability to know how to drive, how fast to go, is usulul fiqh. But just knowing how to drive a car is not enough for us to say you will drive successfully to your destination if you don't know the traffic rules. A good driver doesn't just know how to drive, but he knows the traffic rules. If we were to go to the UK now and you ask me, Nuru, do you have a driver's license? I say yes. Here's a car, our way to. But in the UK, they drive on the left-hand side of the road. We in Nigeria drive on the right. I don't know enough about the traffic rules. I will not drive. Why? As good as I am at driving here, I will probably cause an accident to myself or others. These traffic rules that guide driving are called the qawaid al-fiqhiyya, the legal maxims. There are 5 that are universal, and if you listen to each of those maxims, you will probably realize that whatever religion somebody belongs to, they wouldn't have a problem with any of those maxims. The first maxim, al-umur bi maqasidiha. Matters are judged by their purposes. Matters are judged by their purposes. Both the niyyah, because of innamal a'mal binniyat, actions are judged by the intention, but also because of a hadith where the Prophet ﷺ said innamal a'mal bil hawatim, actions are judged based on the consequences, how they end. And so al-umur bi maqasidiha is a maxim that should guide us in lawmaking and ensure that both the objective in your intention and the objective of the law are realized. The moment it is clear a law is going to realize an objective that is not the objective of Shari'ah, that law is faulty. Why? Because it is contradicting something that clearly comes from the Quran and Sunnah. So put pause and go and get the jurist who knows how to reconcile. The second maxim, al-yaqeen la yazulu bi-shak, that certainty is not overruled by doubt. That every decision must be based on the stronger evidence, whether it is the preponderance of the evidence, whether it is the evidence beyond reasonable doubt, or whether it is beyond evidence that is beyond the shadow of doubt. The moment you have different grades of evidence, we should be biased in favor of stronger evidence. We don't go with superstition. We follow the argument and the evidence wherever it leads us. The third maxim, ad-darar yuzal, that harm must be eliminated. The law should either leave the problem the way it is or make things better, but don't ever make things worse. A marriage problem, you can't make the marriage worse. Somebody is abused, you can't make abuse worse. The moment something is harmful, poverty, injustice, the moment anything is harmful, we have to remember that the objectives of Sharia, the maqasid of Sharia, are jalbul masalih, accruing of benefit, and what? Darul mafasid, the removal of harm. This is an Islamic requirement as it is the requirement of every legal system. The fourth maxim, al-mashaqqa tajlibu at-taysir, that hardship, victimhood calls for concessions, that we temper justice with mercy, especially for victims. We should be victim-centric and make sure, while we are trying to solve a problem, we don't get too carried away with the problem, like solving poverty, and we forget about palliative to people who are suffering poverty. So we should look at the victims while we look at the problems and deal with both. Show compassion to victims. And the last of the maxims, al-ada muhakkama, a very powerful maxim, that norms of a people have the weight of law in Islam. In fact, they would say when it comes to people's norms in the area of mu'amalat, interpersonal, transactional, social issues, like a lot of the topics we're discussing, those issues that are not ibadah or acts of aqidah. The moment it is not an act of ibadah, the general legal default in Sharia is al-aslu fil ashya al-ibadah. The legal premise of Sharia, the default law, the default judgment of Sharia is things are permissible in the absence of evidence. The onus of proof for saying something is haram is on the person saying it is haram. Halal is the default. Just as you say a person is innocent until proven guilty, before we've even heard the case, you've said he's innocent. And he remains innocent until evidence to the contrary can be established. The same thing in Islam, we have legal defaults. And one of them is that people are innocent until proven guilty. That harm is haram by default unless you can justify it. That justice implies equality unless you can show that there should be inequality in this particular case. That substances are pure by their nature unless you can prove that there is najas. If somebody brings a substance and pours on your clothes, you can go straight and pray not knowing what it is, unless evidence can be established to the contrary. That customary laws, man-made customary laws, man-made public interest laws are halal by default. Traffic laws are halal by default. Why? Because they serve public interest and are ratified by maslaha or Shari'ah, preventing accidents. So when it comes to judging anything, be very careful about two things. Be very careful about making halal what is haram. But equally, be very careful about making haram what is halal. And it's a terrible thing to make a thing that is halal by default, you are treating it as if it is haram by default. When we look at customary foods, customary names, is Ungozi an Islamic name? Is it a halal name? Is Abu Bakr a Jahiliyyah name?
Yes.
Yes, so it's a pre-Islamic cultural name. But it didn't conflict with Sharia. So the Prophet adopted it. Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. Ngozi, it's Igbo. So we just ask, what does it mean? If it has a good meaning, even a neutral meaning, but they say it means blessing. Oh, like Barakah, yes. What's wrong? It's a very Islamic name. Let's be very careful about the simplistic classification of things as Islamic and Islamic. That is very dangerous for those of you in law. It's okay for general public, Islamic banking, Islamic studies, Islamic. But if you look at Islamic finance, a lot of mudaraba, musharaka, ijara, istisna, a lot of these things were pre-Islamic Jahiliyyah ways of business that met the halal criteria, and so they are halal. And they are accepted. In Islam, things are classified. There's fard and wajib, there's mustahab, mubah, makruh and haram. Be very careful about just saying Islamic and then by assumption, if it's not Islamic, we will then say it's what? Un-Islamic. But makruh, there's no sin. It's not un-Islamic, even though we try to avoid it. The maqasid of Sharia. So if we carry on, as I get close to rounding up, if we look at the metaphor of the driver and the need for the knowledge of usul, but he also needs to know the traffic laws. But if you know the laws of traffic and you know how to drive, is that enough for you to get me to my house? If you don't know what my house looks like, if you don't know where my house is, how can knowledge of how to drive and knowledge of traffic laws bring you safely to the destination? And that's why it is important to have a deep knowledge of the maqasid of Sharia, the destination. Why? Just like a father or like a mother. I'm not a medical expert, but I know enough to know when my child is getting better and when he's getting worse. And if I take my sick child to the hospital and the doctor gives his prescription and we go back and the doctor says, come back in 2 days. And we come back in 2 days and the son is getting worse. The doctor says, here's this medication, come back in another 2 days. And in 2 days the doctor, the child is getting worse. I go to the doctor says, don't worry, here's another medication. Is that okay? Will you go back? Will you go to self-medication? Yes? Or will you look for another doctor? Yes. So even though I'm not a doctor, I know enough to know the maqasid of medicine. To know the final objective is that this boy should start laughing again, start playing again. And that temperature should go back to its 37 point something degrees. And his heartbeat should go back to what is normal. So while I don't know what is the best diagnosis and the prescription, I know when he is not getting better. And once somebody proposes a law, that is why medical doctors will not want to give you a diagnosis or a prescription on the phone. They want to see you. They want to make sure good diagnosis is done. What other medication are you on? What is the medicine for malaria? What is the medicine for malaria? What will a doctor say? A doctor will say, who is the patient? Is it a child? Is it a pregnant woman? Is it somebody who is already taking this medicine or who has already taken that medicine that you are prescribing? Every case will be judged case by case. And this is the danger today of picking fatwas online and just giving them to any case when you don't know the context. Maghrib prayer is fard, but it's not fard until Maghrib time comes. It's not fard if you are a woman in your monthly periods. The time for Maghrib is flexible if you are a traveler. So what is the hukum of Maghrib? There's the normal hukum, it is wajib. But there's what they call the ahkam al-wadiyah, those contexts that make the conclusion fair to its context. We should continue to respect those fundamental universal teachings that all scholars accept. They are the ma'lum min ad-din bil-darura. They are those things that are established by the Quran and Hadith mutawatir, that are ijma' qat'i. There's no difference of opinion among schools on those fundamentals. But when something doesn't belong to those fundamentals, and it is now open to human reasoning, ijtihad, what to do about the sick cow, then you start increasing or you get an error margin. And it becomes critical to triangulate. Like the topics of today, but like any other issue. You need those scholars who are good with usul, also good with qawaid, also good with maqasid, but who are also professionals of the subject area they are talking about. You don't get somebody who he studied usul methodology and usul and qawaid and maqasid, because I would want to say maqasid is not a tool isolated from usul al-fiqh. It's a tool that comes in usually when you start looking at maslaha, sadr, zariya and istihsan. The same thing with the qawaid. But ijtihad today requires triangulation. You need the ulama of waqi, the scholars of the field. You don't do fiqh on medicine if you don't know anything about medicine. And so fatwa councils on biomedical issues would always have the doctors who are competent in their areas. If you don't know anything about vaccinations, don't open your mouth to say vaccine, halal, haram. What do the experts of that subject say? Ask. Allah says, فَاسْأَلُوا أَهْلَ ذِكْرِ إِن كُنْتُمْ لَا تَعْلَمُونَ. Ask those who know. If your question is important to you, please ask and keep asking. Prophets ask questions to Allah. How do you bring the dead back to life? Dust and all gone. Ibrahim had questions for Allah. Musa alayhi salam had questions for Allah. You know, what do you look like? Maryam, Mary, the mother of Jesus, peace be upon them both, was told by an angel you are going to have a son. You know, in Allah has chosen you, purified you. You are going to have a son. But it doesn't make sense to her. So what does she do? Keep quiet? No, she asks, how can I have a son when no man has touched me? Allah informs the angels that He is going to create human beings. They did not think it was a good idea. And they asked Allah, after says, Inni ja'ilun fil ard khalifa, I'm going to put a vicegerent on earth. And they are asking, Ataj'alu fiha, are you going to put on earth one who will cause corruption and shed blood? وَنَحْنُ نُسَبِّحُ بِحَمْدِكَ, we glorify like Allah. It doesn't make sense to us. But in the presence of the creator of this universe, they were bold enough to ask. And the creator of this universe wanted us to know He has no problem with questions that are sincerely seeking truth. And so He repeats it for us in the Quran, for mankind till the day of judgment. Let no scholar tell you, who are you to ask me? Truth stands on truth. قُلْ هَاتُوا بُرْهَانَكُمْ إِن كُنتُمْ صَادِقِينَ. Bring your evidence if what you say is true. I will end with emphasizing why we need more students to study these subject areas related to ijtihad. Usul al-fiqh, qawaid al-fiqhiyah, maqasid Shari'ah, but also to have respect for their limits and the importance of specialists in the field you are talking about. Because if we do not have more people who know how to think, all we will do is just say that scholar some centuries ago regarding this question gave this prescription. It is just identical to saying a doctor who lived 100 years ago prescribed this medicine for this illness. That's the one we are going to prescribe for you. Even though you should be diagnosed anew and given a prescription. If it coincides with the past one, good. But you don't blindly follow scholars. You do what the scholars did. The scholars went back to Quran and Sunnah. They went back to evidence and built their evidence. You can't just forget about the scholars, but you can't also establish your opinion on scholars. You establish your opinion on what the scholars established their opinion on, which is Quran and Sunnah. And for an acronym, if you remember Iqra, I miss you. Iqra, I-Q-R-A, yes, Ijma, Qiyas, Ra'i, Amal. Iqra. I, Istishab, legal presumption. M-I-S-S, Maslaha, Istihsan, Sajjuzariya. And you, and then the double S, Sharu Man Qablana, and then the you being Urf and I. Your teachers already know this. Inshallah, it will be easier for you to remember. Arabic language has over 100 words, 100 names for lions. They will say Asad means what? Lion. Haidar, lion. Osama, lion. Hamza, lion. But there is not a single lion in the whole of the Middle East. What happened? In ecology, in the environment, there are certain species that are recognized as keystone species. These are species that are critical to the survival of the ecology and the environment. And the apex predators, wolves, lions, are among those keystone species. So long as they are around, they check the excesses of antelopes and mountain goats and ibexes and gazelles. They check the excesses of the herbivores. And in Arabic poetry, they have a lot to say about lions. You start wondering, so where are the lions today? You can see it in their cave drawings, lions. But no more lions. From Lebanon to Yemen, Saudi Arabia, all gone. If there are any new ones, it's those that they are trying to introduce, or what you will find in a zoo. So what happens? In Arabic poetry, this part of the world also had forests. Today it's a desert. Desert. There's not even one river in the whole of Saudi Arabia. What happened was, people became very interested in hunting lions for the mane and the skin. And every king wanted a lion, or to be able to have the leather of a lion on his throne, or beside his throne, or stuffed. So what happened? They gradually brought the lions to extinction. After removing all the lions, you would have thought that's fine, it's all done, it's just lions. But because there were no more lions, there were no more predators to eat the gazelles and the antelopes. No more predators to eat the mountain goats. So they increased in their numbers. What little grass remained, the antelopes finished the grass. Any plant that was trying to grow, the mountain goats finished all of those. The ibexes, the oryxes, the gazelles, all, they just converted the place into a desert. And that's the desert we now call the Arabian Desert. The same thing happened in Yellowstone Park in America. Last century, they finished hunting all the wolves. Why? Because they felt that these wolves were eating sheep and goats and chickens of the farmers. So what was the solution? Just kill all the wolves. And that's what they did. They killed the wolves. But as the years and decades started to pass, they started to notice the environment was changing. They had clean rivers. The rivers are now getting dirty. The land was gradually becoming like a desert. People studied the phenomena and concluded that the solution to this problem, reintroduce the wolves. And they reintroduced the wolves. The wolves started eating the bison and the antelopes and the elk. And because the wolves were hunting, these animals would not stay in one place and eat everything completely. The moment they gather, start eating, wolf will come to catch. They will move. So they allowed the grass to gradually grow. As the grass started to grow, whenever it rained, instead of rain taking soil straight into the water, the grass would filter. The river started to get cleaner. Fish started to come back. Who would have guessed that just removing one keystone species would affect the movement of the rivers, the cleanliness of the water? And as trees started to grow, 70 years later, birds started to come back. Squirrels started to come back. Beavers started to come back. Fish came back. Life came back. And what was going to become a desert became a live forest and healthy ecology. Within human society, we have keystone subjects, keystone species. And in the area of law, legal theory is a keystone subject. Unfortunately, the experts in those areas are becoming extinct. And we are getting a desert in our intellectual landscape. Extremism of every type. Scholars of hadith who know nothing about urf, maslaha, saddu zariya, shar'u man qablana, have now turned themselves, they are muhaddithun, no? They are respected, but they are now dabbling into fiqh and giving fatwas and being like muftis with no prerequisite qualification. Scholars of tafsir. Scholars of tafsir of Quran who don't know about the sciences of hadith, but every Ramadan will give you wonderful tafsir. They don't study qiyas and maslahah and ulf. Check their curriculum, it's not part of their studies. But today, everybody is dabbling into fiqh. And to compound the problem, it would have been okay if people knew who to go to. But many people are like villagers who come to the hospital. And he will take his pregnant wife to the doctor. My wife is sick. What's the problem? And the baby is moving one kind. But I'm a dentist. But you're a doctor now. What is supposed to go to the psychiatrist is going to the gynecologist. What is to go to the gynecologist is going to the dentist. My prayer is that this department, you know what I like with these topics is you can't quote any scholar of the past. You have to know legal theory. And it allows us to see whether your thinking is archaic or whether you've got the operating system, version 2024, that will give you current reality. I pray that the effort that this department has started will be supported by the university, that your output goes online and inspires other universities to discuss topics that are relevant to current realities, that our Sharia laws are as close to justice as justice goes. Because if there's a need for ijtihad or juristic reasoning on a topic, because there's a disconnect between the rulings of Shari'ah and the maqasid of Shari'ah, the objectives, and you do not have the competences to ensure that justice is achieved, and instead you try to realize injustice in the name of Sharia, Allah will not support you. The Prophet ﷺ said, and he warned us, I warn you about the prayer, the dua of the mazloom, even if that person is a disbeliever. The Prophet ﷺ says there is no hijab, no barrier between the prayer of somebody who is a victim of injustice and the answering of Allah to that prayer. We pray that not as a judge, not as a lawyer, do you make the mistake of promoting injustice to any victim irrespective of their religion. The Prophet ﷺ said, in fact you had paraphrasing of it by scholars. Ibn Taymiyyah said, Allah will protect a community who govern themselves through justice even if they are not Muslims. And Allah will not protect a community that govern themselves through injustice, even if they are Muslims. Allah is not our fan. Allah is not the head of our supporters club. Allah is with those who are just. I pray that we study the truths that help us get to justice, because justice, aqrab al-taqwa, is closest to godliness. Where I've made mistakes, I pray Allah to forgive me.